One of the interesting things about our body is the fact that when something goes wrong, there's a good chance a bunch of things are going wrong. However, the flip side of that happens to also be true. When we make intentional choice to deploy meaningful change, those things tend to get better together. I know. Funny how that works. And I've got the perfect example to drive this point home that we are going to break down today, especially if you find yourself struggling with that little voice in your head. Sorry, thought I just heard it. Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Today we are going to dive into this very interesting, hot off the scientific streets new research, highlighting how the state of our mind is very much associated and implicated in the state of the rest of our body, and thus our odds, likelihood, and probability of health or disease. And it uses the oh so common variables of stress, depression, cardiovascular disease, and exercise to display this very connection. And following this data dump, we are going to break down why this information is super valuable as it pertains to writing the course of your biological ship, or keeping it as the finely tuned, pretty cool meat suit machine that it is. With that, let's embark. Researchers from Mass General Hospital sought to see how physical activity, stress, and depression interplay to affect cardiovascular disease outcomes in adults. And the thing that made this study extremely interesting was the fact that it explored the structure of the brain in a sample size of participants to see literally how it was altered by activity levels. And the results were eye-opening, in a non-stressful way, of course. To do this, they analyzed records for over 50,000 participants in the Mass General Brigham Biobank and reviewed brain scans in over 700 of whom were measured for stress-related brain activity, finding, after a 10-year follow-up, roughly 13% of participants developed cardiovascular disease. Question being, what were the links to those three previously mentioned variables? Stress, depression, and exercise. Let's take a look. First, the participants who reported that they regularly perform physical activity had a 23% lower risk of developing cardiovascular disease compared to those who didn't. No shocker here. However, when we look at the brain, things begin to get interesting, finding that individuals with higher levels of physical activity also tended to have lower stress-related brain activity. Notably, this was observed to be correlated with gains in function within the prefrontal cortex, a region of the brain involved in executive function such as decision-making and impulse control, while also being known to play a big role in restraining the stress centers of the brain. Makes you think. I know. Now, what about depression? Where does that come into the mix? Well, for individuals who started the study with a history of mental health challenges, like depression, researchers observed that the cardiovascular benefits of exercise was substantially greater in that cohort, meaning they got a bigger bang for their exercise buck. So much so that the senior author stated, physical activity was roughly twice as effective in lowering cardiovascular disease risk among those with depression, and that these effects on the brain stress-related activity may explain this novel observation. Super interesting. And although this is all just observational and does not establish a causal link, I see this as something pretty damn significant because it reiterates a truth that we've talked about quite a bit on this channel and even teased in the intro, if you remember that far back. The fact that everything is connected. Dysfunction from systemic drivers such as stress and chronic inflammation are not bound to one section or system within the body. And even in the cases where it has its main impact locally, the system which is affected, whether it be the brain, cardiovascular system, liver, microbiome, or literally anywhere else can and will impair other systems due to the nature of being an ever-connected entity. We have seen this over and over again throughout the years of papers that we've reviewed on this channel. For example's sake, here is a very real and possible scenario. Excess stress and poor eating habits drive blood vessels to be chronically constricted, as a result impairing blood flow and elevating blood pressure all throughout the body, including the brain, ultimately damaging microvessels delivering nutrients and oxygen to neurons, and impairing the brain's ability to receive and utilize oxygen, which we kinda need. Not cool, I know, but we're not done. In parallel, inflammation from a chronically leaky gut, built up visceral fat, and metabolic dysfunction, three common byproducts of the Western diet and deprived sleep, a very popular combo in this day and age, arouse the immune system to the point that it impairs neuronal activity and increases the likelihood of depression, along with a laundry list of other potential side effects, like brain fog. Oh, and might I add, increased inflammation is also one of the prerequisites for atherosclerosis, or the buildup of plaque in arteries and vessels. Now, although we've been on sort of a negative roll here, this should not be looked at as all doom and gloom, because this hurricane of dysfunction also has a weak spot, and it's the opposing storm of efficiency. As it has been displayed over and over again, that when we deploy the habits, routines, and rituals that promote efficient cellular function, many of these dysfunction drivers evaporate, and oftentimes with it, the deteriorating conditions that they're facilitating, as we saw a great example of in this study we just reviewed. In fact, we saw this to an even greater extent than you may have realized. This is what got me excited when I initially read it. Because if we put our speculation hat on for a moment and attempt to connect some dots, it would be plausible to believe that the participants in this study with depression were suffering from some more cellular dysfunction compared to the average individual, being displayed on the outside as their depressive symptoms. And because they were all starting in a more impaired cellular baseline, their potential upside from the exercise intervention was greater. And that was displayed in the observational results. Again, dubious speculation, but also backed by a few things we know, as moving our badonkadonk in an intentional and methodical way has been shown over and over again to alter our physiological and biochemical state for the better, upregulating a series of bioactive compounds, including hormones, cytokines, neurotransmitters, and growth factors, which strengthen and reinforce our structural self, aka muscle and bones, improve cellular function and efficiency, including that oh so critical powerhouse organelle, mitochondria, reduces inflammation, triggers cellular cleanup and recycling, aka autophagy, boosts mood and cognition, primes our neurons for learning and connectivity, potentially even stimulating the growth of new ones, enhances microbiome diversity, drives better sleep quality, wipes out cancerous mutations, and as a byproduct, prevents, reverses, and or delays disease. So if you are starting from a state of suboptimal cellular and metabolic function, which I can tell you the majority of people in the modern world are, the upside exercise brings to the table is second to none, likely being the very best thing right up there with real whole food eating and high quality sleep we can all do for enhancing our short-term health and vitality over time. Thus why it is even more important to do if you find yourself within 2 standard deviations of the chronically sick mean. And now that I think of it, ironically making the actual journey, the step-by-step journey to the fountain of youth in and of itself. That being said, we gotta take this back to reality because it is certainly not a silver bullet either. As we've talked about ad nauseum across the hundreds of health and longevity videos on this channel, to truly feel good, to feel how you are capable of feeling, refreshed, restored, rejuvenated every single damn day, it takes a holistic strategy. one which encompasses high-quality circadian aligned sleep, real whole foods, proactive stress management, nature, along with that good old badonkadonking. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over many nights, and only if you make the true commitment to yourself to own your health, because no one else will or should care about the function and well-being of your pretty cool meat suit more than you. And if all this sounds kind of like a lot right now, know that it only gets as complicated as you want it to get. If you're starting from a place of utter inconsistency when it comes to something like exercise, habit stacking a simple walk before or after a task in your daily routine, like getting up, having a meal, coffee, or getting home from work, can move the cellular efficiency needle a lot more than you may imagine. And when you begin to see and feel the difference, that will only reinforce and solidify the healthy habit into your routine, creating a baseline to build on. Maybe that walk turns into a jog 1 or 2 days a week, or some at-home strength training, or some healthy, nourishing meals afterwards to maximize recovery. Simple steps are the best steps. One of my favorite mental models is remembering that healthy habits build on each other like compound interest in the longevity bank. And the healthier you become, the more your body will crave health. Your cellular and metabolic self wants to operate efficiently, so start giving it a fighting chance already. The byproducts of which will be the best gift of all, feeling consistently good. If you're in search for a little tactical help, I have linked a bunch of videos in the show notes below, breaking down practical daily things you can do to improve these foundational components of health and longevity. The best strategy being to pick one thing at a time and focus on slow and sustainable change. Because remember, everything's connected and everything impacts everything else. So you'll be doing everything a favor by making the choice to own the first thing. Is it just me, or are you all of a sudden craving an everything bagel too? I wonder why.